Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Guardian Film Show, beamed to you from the Prince Charles Cinema in the Serengeti of central London. Outside it's hot as hell, inside it may well be pure chaos, although rest assured we'll be doing our best to keep the ructions and explosions confined to the screen behind our heads. Coming up on this week's show, Channing Tatum and special friends put on a show in Magic Mike XXL. Terminator Genisys resets the clock for everyone except poor, raddled Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we look back on the mercurial life of Orson Welles in the documentary Magician. But that's not all, because we are also joined by the director and producer of the excellent documentary Amy, while cinematographer Phil Méheux is on hand to run us through the restoration of the Bob Hoskins British classic, The Long Good Friday. First up, it's Asif Kapadia's monumental documentary portrait of the troubled life and brilliant times of the singer Amy Winehouse. Illuminating, heartbreaking, and not without controversy, this is Amy.
Oh, it's a bit upsetting at the end, isn't it?
She was highly intelligent, the most intelligent person I knew.
She was so utterly authentic.
Amy, just give us a smile and then we can turn the camera off.
You promise?
She had such an emotional relationship to music.
You're becoming an artist in the public eye.
The more people see of me, the more they'll realise that all I'm good for is making music.
And the Grammy goes to Amy Winehouse.
She was one of the truest artists I ever heard.
The world wanted a piece of her.
Amy was a girl that just wanted to be loved.
I fell in love with someone who I would have died for. And that's like a real drug, isn't it?
This is someone who is trying to disappear.
Joining me now on stage is Catherine Short and Peter Bradshaw, along with producer James Gay-Rees and director Asif Kapadia. Welcome.
Hi. Hello.
This is a film that goes behind the increasingly lurid headlines and in doing so overturns a lot of preconceptions about who Amy Winehouse was. And presumably in making it, you had to overturn some of your own preconceptions, both of you. Did you have a set idea of who she was when you were embarking on this film?
I don't think I did. I really don't. I just remember I knew she was a good singer. I knew she was out there. I knew there's a lot of problems around her. There's a lot of this kind of cloud that seemed to follow her around town.
I was living in the States at the time, so I kind of missed it all. And so when I was approached by a record company with the idea of doing this movie, it was a real sort of, I mean, there was an instinctive kind of like, yeah, there's got to be a great story in there somewhere. But I didn't know anything about it at all. And I'd only really sort of loosely caught the kind of all that tabloid stuff. So I wasn't really all over that. And I wasn't a massive fan of the music. Again, it wasn't really on my radar. So it was a real step into the unknown, but with this sort of suspicion that there was something incredible to investigate, basically. And I think it's fair to say we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
The people featured in this documentary are, most of them still seem incredibly protective of her. How did you go about winning their trust to speak to you?
So I mean, really, the Amy came about because of Senna, in many ways, because the head of Universal Music had loved that film, and they contacted James and said, what do you think? And Senna helped us a lot to get this film made, because really nobody wanted to talk. It was quite soon after Amy had died, so there was a lot of pain still there. People were still grieving. There was a lot of anger. You know, it was still quite raw for everybody. And to be honest, most people I spoke to would say, don't want to do it, not interested. So it took a while to earn their trust. And really the first stage for me as a director was just to talk to people, meet them one by one, earn their trust, and then just say, look, I'd love to just talk to you, because I don't know what the story is. We ended up having a microphone. I had a sound studio in Soho Square. They'd come in, we'd have a chat, just a microphone, the two of us. I'd turn the lights off, we'd sit in the dark. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about it. And if you're not comfortable with anything you've said, do not sign a release form. I can't use it. And that's how it worked. But one by one, they started to talk. And once they started to talk, they couldn't stop. The process became quite therapeutic. I'm not in the music business. I didn't know anyone. I never met Amy. I never saw her live. So we really were outsiders. And it helped them all to kind of get some stuff off their chest, really.
Obviously, people have fixed on the dissenting voice of Mitch Winehouse, Amy's father, who feels that he's been misrepresented in the film. You would presumably say that he has been treated fairly.
Yeah, I mean, the film, like I said, I went in there with no knowledge of the subject, no agenda. Life's too short to spend 3 years of your life trying to pick on someone. It was really, the film's about her, and we felt our job was to do the best by Amy and to show why did things turn out the way they did. And from all of the research, all of the people we spoke to, and all of the footage we've seen, the film is an honest representation of our experience and our homework and our research. And because it's made of archive, you're hearing people and seeing people say and do what they were doing at the time.
I think there's one also sort of crucial thing to add to that, which is that, you know, we were approached to make this movie. It wasn't like we had this burning desire to make this film, so we had no idea what the movie was going to be. We went with a complete blank piece of paper because we didn't know her, and I never even saw her in concert, you know what I mean? So we had no handle on the story at all. But I think maybe Mitch kind of, in his head, had an idea of what he wanted it to be, you know. I don't know what that is, by the way. It's just that, you know, I think that he probably thought it was somewhere over here, but we were like, well, we don't know what it is. And, you know, we had no agenda then, we have no agenda now.
Yeah. There was an agenda, I suppose. The agenda was to tell Amy's story. The thing that kept coming up with all of the meetings that I had, where everyone would say, what kind of film are you going to make? Are you going to show the real Amy? Are you just going to do more of what everyone else does? Mm-hmm. And that was the agenda was, well, let's try and rebalance it and tell the story from Amy's point of view as much as we could.
Without knowing exactly what that was.
Jump into the question. What I found fascinating about the film is that it's called Amy, and it delivers you Amy in almost every scene. It's one of those very rare films. I can't think of another film where the star is present in close-up in every frame.
Talking to you.
Her gigantic face.
You start having a conversation
delivering it to you, mainlining it into your veins. This is Amy over and over again. What was it? What did it feel like when somebody must have turned over and said, I'll show you, I've got this incredible amount of home movie footage. Watch this.
I look like a floating head, you know, I've got no hair. I'm just on a black screen. There's my hand. What's going on?
We'd recorded quite a few demo recordings, and I started to talk about whether she'd ever consider writing. She said she's not sure about writing songs, but she's written a lot of poems. She knew full well she'd been writing songs, but they were very personal songs.
The other kind of key relationship in the film is with Blake Fielder, which is obviously a much more compromised, poisoned relationship, and yet the paradox there is that that's also the catalyst for the Back to Black album, which is her kind of creative high point. Yeah. Is that how you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, again, everything is so complicated. Without that kind of love affair and without him dumping her, she doesn't have the breakdown, which then she has to write her way out of, which is what creates the album that everyone knows. So either they'd have stayed together, everything would have been happy ever after in their own peculiar kind of life that we're living, or, you know, it's really, that's the interesting thing. Do you want a record or do you want a person still around? And Nick actually mentions at one point in the film, he was thinking there was an opportunity to drop in there, step in, stop it all, save her, and maybe the album would never have happened. But at least she had an opportunity because she wasn't famous. And after the record, everyone felt it became more and more difficult to stop this machine.
Part of the problem down the line was that when she became a massive star and she was this kind of complete sort of, you know, sort of media entity, she was stuck in her house. She couldn't get outside. She stopped living in, basically, to all intents and purposes. And for somebody like her, who had to hit the street and have a drama and pull back from the brink, if you can't go out and live your life in that way, then there's really nothing to write about, you know. So she stopped sort of creating, I think, which is the kind of great tragedy. And that is the kind of why, you know, fame is the devil in this movie, because it's just, some people can deal with it, but it seems like a lot of people can't.
The story really became about jazz, in a way, was good for her. Yeah. And being a pop star was bad. I mean, it was really, if you wanted to simplify it, it was really, that became the problem. have a hit record, and you're not in control of your career anymore.
I'm going to see if anybody here has any questions for James and Asif about Amy.
From what you're saying, and from the clips that we've seen, it seems like you're not trying to do the classic portrait biopic, but more an immersive experience into sort of someone's life and into their sort of heart and their mind. And I wondered, from your vantage point, did you ever reach that point in all the interviews where you sort of lost objectivity? I mean, you kind of got angered or deeply involved?
Interesting. It's a good question. If anything, it was the other way. We went from not particularly... I wasn't necessarily a huge fan, but I was intrigued by the whole situation, and I think at some point I kind of fell in love with her. You know, you just really like her. We really all... And there were people in the crew, in the post-production team who were very young and who were not from the UK, didn't really know her music. I don't like Amy, I'm not interested. It's just a job. They're just working on a film. One by one, you could see the point when you go, oh, God, she's amazing. You know, they all fell for her. There was something about her character and her personality. And so, if anything, it went that way. But I think that just helps. When you're going to spend that many years making a subject, you hope and pray that you like the subject rather than dislike them during it. And with her, it was all positive, actually.
At the risk of being a kind of amateur psychiatrist, were you able to identify one kind of key point where if she'd just gone a different way, things might have been different?
The place, if there's one, it's the one we highlight. It's the one that we all know. You know the track. I mean, that's the point. But even that, you know, it's a movie. We have to conflate time. And, you know, even that will have been 3 occasions that were all around the same time. But there was a point, which was after Frank and before Back to Black, when after Blake has left her, when she really hits rock bottom, when Nick did try, her kind of first manager, Szymanski, tried to help her and literally put in a car and drove 100 miles somewhere to a place and took her to a rehab place. And she went and met a guy and she says, walks out of it and she says, I only go if, you know, a certain person wants me to go. So he drives 200 miles back to kind of get that approval, which has all been set up. And then that person changed their mind. And the song is called Rehab.
Asif, James, it's a tremendous film, and thanks so much for coming in to discuss it with us. And Asif Kapadia's Amy is well worth checking out. Let's now turn our attention to the other films that are out this week, and first off the block, it's Terminator Genisys, resetting the clock and rewriting Hollywood history. It's almost as if all of the other Terminator movies never even happened.
Listen to me, Reese, everything's changed. The 1984 John sent you to, it no longer exists.
No, this is all wrong, all right? John sent me here to save you.
From the Terminator that was sent back to kill me, I know, but we already took care of him.
We? Get down!
God! Reese, stop it! Reese, damn it!
Stay here!
Reese, wait! Those bullets will kill him!
It's here to kill you. Stay in the truck.
Oh, great. That's just great.
I did not kill him.
I'm joined by Peter Bradshaw and Catherine Short. Peter, did this make you feel 30 years younger?
It made me feel 30,000 years older. I just was, God almighty. The first Terminator is such a good film, and I have to say, I think all of the sequels are kind of not any good, really, compared to even T2.
Really? Even
T2, which people love. I think, I mean, I'm a little bit off message about this. I think there is something fundamentally wrong-headed and sentimental about making Arnie's Terminator figure a good guy. I never, ever got behind that. I mean, it worked well in T2 on a kind of surface level, a hell of a lot better than it works here. But the idea that he's back again, he's still a good guy, but now he's a lovable old retainer. I mean, almost like something that Robin Williams would play in a way. I mean, I thought it was just really muddled and very, very boring.
Catherine, knowing you as I do, I'm sure
Yes.
this was right
I'm
up
sure
your
you
street.
loved. Catherine loved it. No. No, Catherine hated
No, I
it.
quite liked it.
Oh.
I have to say. Sorry. Yeah, I think people are really nostalgic in a bad way about those early films, and they go on and on about them.
They do.
Actually, they're not that great.
What?
I mean, and also the thing is that back in the old days, you know, before even I can remember, it was exciting to see the special effects, and it was exciting to see a robot that then, you know, once you shot it to death, it came back to life. Nowadays, of course, that happens all the time. And so people don't get very excited about it. There's problems. So the plot is a big problem, the idea that smartphones might be evil. It's a bit, oh my God, you can't believe they're doing that. And the main guy, you just get, you know, for the first opening, you sort of think, who's this guy? What, some cameo or some sort of bit part? And then you slowly realise he's the main guy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh my God, could you get a more boring person? Yeah. But Jason Clarke's really good. Jason Clarke, who plays the, well, anyway, he's got a fantastically evil, interesting face. He's great in it.
What I loved about the first one is that it was before abs were invented in 1984. He came on and he had massive pecs and buttocks as well. The first film showed his bum, and the same shot in this one is very coy. It doesn't do that. Now they're much more kind of coy and powderized, because the first one actually showed his arse, which was, you know, those buns of steel. But it was marvellous. But it didn't show, I suspect, because Arnie's, you know, what he hadn't built was abs in the, well, we'll talk about Magic Mike in a minute. See, Magic Mike is in the era of abs. Arnie came to in the sort of post-Charles Atlas era, where you had massive back and massive shoulder.
Right. You've studied this quite thoroughly.
Sorry, I don't want to sound like a physique queen here. I don't want to sound like I'm only more of a physique queen, obviously, than I am. But it was before abs were invented. I mean, I loved Terminator, because it was Arnold's great moment. Nobody but him could have played it. It was like Yul Brynner in Westworld. It was very bizarre. He was playing a robot, and yet he was just, it was the right time and the right place. And he's kind of shackled to it from then on. And of course, then, I don't know, he was stuck with having to be the good version of the Terminator. And this would have been the right time to everybody talks about franchises going back to their dark roots. Yeah. This would have been a great time for that cliche, for once, to be true, to bring the Terminator back to its dark roots, to bring the Terminator himself, to make him a bad guy again, and it doesn't really do that.
And we've had the superheroes of Terminator Genisys getting their abs and their nexus in a twist, and at the risk of the show getting still more hot and heavy, we now turn over the floor to a bunch of male strippers, although, despite Peter's protestations earlier, we'll be sitting this one out as spectators.
Is this how the whole trip is going to be? You're gonna be on this thing the whole time?
Are you kidding? Relax, I got a bunch of orders, just came in, all the guys at the shop are just freaking out.
If you're gonna be here, man. Be present.
Okay, I'll be present.
All right, that's it.
What are you doing? iPhone went by phone. Are you serious right now? What am I supposed to do?
I should chuck your big ass right off of this truck. That's the Mikey I remember. Look, if you ain't ready to bring it old school this weekend, then you need to hop off this food truck right now.
Why do you think I came this weekend?
I don't know, man. It's been a long time. But I do know this. You better be ready to follow my ass down the rabbit hole, brother. I'm talking out of body, baby. Woo! Astral projection. Tobias, we're going to Mad Mary's.
Hell yeah.
Nobody messes with the mojo on the last ride, brother.
Catherine, do you have any hen night anecdotes you care to share at this point?
Yeah, I'm not certainly known to share them at this point. A bit later. No, and I mean, that clip does actually give a very clear indication of what this film is like, which is like a sort of reality TV show that's sort of badly scripted. And so if there's a point about, I mean, Magic Mike 1 was very good. I thought was very interesting and sort of dark and you know, interesting. This throws everything of that out. It's just not at all interested in being interesting. It's sort of interested in being boring like a soap, or having them strip, but mostly being boring like a soap. So all the guys have got individual little problems. Like one of them wants to start his own yogurt business.
Frozen yogurt.
Yeah, you have to hear about this endlessly. Like, I'm not sure if I can make the kiwi work. And they say, oh yeah, that was really nice, that kiwi. And then he sort of says later, I'll run the numbers with you. It's like, really, we're meant to care. And then there's another guy has a thing. And then like the very good looking one, Matt Bone? Matt Bone, he has a, there's like, we're meant to remember that from the first film there's some tension between him and Chad. What? I mean, how the hell are we meant to remember that? So, I mean, it's a very strange, it's very unusually dull, this film.
And the tension seems to be, should he throw out the fireman outfit?
Yeah.
Should I keep the fireman outfit or throw it out and do something new? You're like, well, whatever.
There's a lot of discussion, a facetious discussion about this in the last one, but is it actually very gay, or is it... And it seems to be, it's kind of not...
Which a lot of people are making great claims for the fact that it's very subtly, knowingly gay.
Super subtle.
It's not at all gay, I don't think. I don't think it's either all that straight either. It's the sexuality is kind of amputated from it. And what you've got is all these scenes where, these rather horrible scenes where people are standing around, these women standing around cheering,
chucking money,
throwing money, which seems to me almost impossibly sordid, and yet the obvious sordidness of it is ignored by the film. I mean, somebody must sweep all this money up at the end and make sure it's handed out, but that is never shown because they're relying on that money. If they're dancing, they're thinking, actually, that's a $50 bill that's gone over there. I want that. You can have the $1 bill. That's the $100 bill. I'm having that one. What's weird about it is, I think, is that it's as if by making them male strippers, not female strippers, it's as if they have at one stroke abolished any question of whether or not it's demeaning. I mean, in theory, it is demeaning. It is, in theory, quite as demeaning as it is for women, and yet because they're guys, and of course within the power structure of society they hold all the cards, that has cancelled it out. So the politics, the sexual politics, has been annulled. It's not been tilted either way. It's just been annulled and cancelled out, and what we're left with is a kind of feel-good, vaguely empowering mood. As Catherine said, it doesn't go anywhere. There's no plot, there's no narrative, nobody changes, nobody surmounts any obstacles, it just drivels on and finishes. And the whole point of the first movie is, do I really want to be a stripper? Is it demeaning? Is it kind of stupid? Should I be doing something worthwhile with my life? And the question and the answer seems to be, in this film, no, forget it. Be a stripper, that's great. That's all we've got.
That's Magic Mike XXL, and from one extra-large magician to another, make room for Orson Welles.
He had established a celebrity that made Hollywood have an appetite for it. He was an extremely successful and ambitious designer of conceptual theater in New York. He had been on the cover of Time magazine. He was an important radio performer, which had made him a worldwide celebrity, and the studios saw that they could make a buck from this.
RKO wanted him, and he kept turning it down. And so every time he turned it down, the contract would get better, because he'd ask for something that this just wouldn't give him, and then they would give it to him.
When you honestly didn't want to go, then the deals got better and better. In my case, I didn't want money. I wanted authority.
There was this guy with a beard who was going to do it all by himself. You know, I represented the terrible future of what was going to happen to that town.
His initial project was an adaptation of Heart of Darkness, which he had done on the radio.
We were a bunch of 22, 23-year-old kids, really. And we had moved in and taken over this studio, and all these people were looking around wondering who the hell we were and what did we think we were going to be doing.
We were not in a very strong financial situation at the time, and we thought this acquisition of Mr. Welles would have done it, but it didn't.
He wanted to shoot the whole movie, more or less, from the perspective of Marlowe, the central character. So we didn't get a close-up of Welles until pretty late in the movie. There were no big movie stars until then, and people wanted to see Welles. And it was a film about blackness. RKO tried to convince him just to hire ordinary extras in blackface in the background, but he wouldn't go with that.
Not knowing anything about it, there was no basis for fear. In other words, if you're walking along the edge of a cliff and you don't know it's the edge of a cliff, you have perfect confidence.
Peter, the life and times of Orson Welles is one of the great narrative arcs of cinema history. Did this shed any light that you weren't on stuff that you weren't aware of before?
I'm not sure that it did. It had lots of still photographs of Orson Welles as a child, which I'd never seen before, which are always brilliant. Photographs of Orson Welles, the image of the kind of baby-faced man that he later became, are always fascinating. And I'm like everybody else who's read a little bit about Welles, you become used to the fact that it starts wonderfully, and it's impossible to listen to the story of Orson Welles without becoming thrilled and carried along and exhilarated by the great man himself, who, through sheer serendipity and luck and charm, miraculously managed to master the art of cinema as an amateur, coming from the theatre, and just through sheer, I don't know, charm or luck or animal magnetism, persuaded a lot of very talented people to to get on board. And basically that meant Greg Tolan, the cinematographer, and Bernard Herrmann as his composer. All the people that were thrilled with Orson Welles' theatre work and very bored with the dull, stereotypical work that the studios were starting to churn out. And Welles just turned up at exactly the right time, and he had the fortune or the ill fortune to create his masterpiece at the very beginning of his career. If it was like halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, if that is when he had created Citizen Kane, then nobody would go on and on and on about him being a failure or a loser or a terrible disappointment. Yeah. But it was his ill fortune to create this wonderful film at the very beginning, and then, well, he never had the same control again. But it was partly his fault because he had a very bad habit of leaving his films unfinished.
Yeah, there's so many towards the end.
He had a very
that are
exasperating.
unfinished.
Partly because he, as a man of the theatre, he was interested in the process rather than the product. I mean, he loved, in the course of a theatre run, it had to be different all the time.
Also, was losing confidence. You had the sense that he was thinking, this isn't as good as I wanted it to be. Therefore, I'll go on to the next.
And he would, and I think to some extent the problem with this film is that it goes along with this idea that Orson Welles was betrayed, and you think, well, to some extent he was, but then he kind of let himself down as well, to some extent. But then I think what is interesting about the film is it makes, I think, a good case for the underrated films like The Stranger, his very Alfred Hitchcockian studio picture that he made.
And The Trial.
Which is a brilliant film. The Trial and I think to some extent The Stranger is prefigures Vertigo. It's an excellent film. I think it could have said more. It's interesting. It also praises Othello, which is his very, very good, very interesting version of Othello. But because Orson Welles appeared in blackface, there is now part of an understandable feeling that, God, that's just so embarrassing. And the same thing happened, of course, with Laurence Olivier, his version of Othello. Although I'm bound to say I think Orson Welles' version is much better than Laurence Olivier's. It's more dynamic. It's more interesting. It's loads more cinematic. I think it could have said more about his Macbeth, which again is very underrated. I mean, Orson Welles' the opening scenes in Macbeth are brilliant. I mean, the sheer chutzpah and panache that he cracks out those opening scenes, the witches scenes in Macbeth, it's his genius, his theatrical genius. Is very apparent there. It emerges he was a superlative adapter of Shakespeare and Shakespearean films. Some of his Shakespearean films were his finest work.
That's Orson Welles bouncing from triumph to disaster. Although, happily, sometimes there are second acts at the movies because the Long Good Friday is back in town, buffed up, big as life, and restored under the supervision of the original cinematographer, Phil Méheux. This is what London's Docklands used to look like.
For the boys in blue.
Yeah? Yeah. What? Right. This is diabolical liberty.
What is it?
Blown up. He's dead. Eric is dead. A car bomb.
Eh?
That was all right. Suffering from shock. He's in the London hospital.
I don't understand.
You need $1 million computer to understand this. Do such a thing. It's outrageous. Outside a church? You don't go crucifying people outside a church, not on Good Friday.
What's the matter, Harold?
Eric's been blown up.
A bomb?
Yeah, in the rolls.
I don't believe it. When?
Just now. Mother's in hospital suffering from shock. I'm not surprised. She
went to church to say our prayers, not to get blown up. But why?
Someone tried to discredit you in front of...
What, the Yanks? No. Nobody knew, did they?
Well, they mustn't find out.
Now they're sleeping. Right, I want everybody in the corporation working on this fast, right? And I want Colin here. Where is he? He should have been here. Where is he?
He went swimming.
Swimming? He should have been here. Right, I want everybody working. Jeff, you get on the blower. Razors, you round them all up and you get them moving fast. Right, keep them on their toes because I want this settled tonight.
And you better see your mother.
Yeah. Listen, if anyone hears anything at all, I'll be at the Mayfair Casino, right? It's the work of a maniac. I'll have his carcass dripping blood by midnight.
And now please welcome the man behind the restoration of the Long Good Friday, Phil Méheux. Thank you. So what state was the film at when you revisited it?
I was asked by Arrow Films initially to do a new Blu-ray release of it. And they said they wanted to go back to the original negative, which is rarely done. What you normally use is the IP, which is called the interpositive, which is from which you make many negatives, which laboratories can make prints. And over time, things fade. It's 36 years old, that film, so, you know, there's colors change very slightly and all the rest of it. So they went back to the original negative and we put it on a scanner and we rescan it and we level everything out and then you can go through it and, I mean, a guy does that without me because it's a long, boring process of just, you know, what do you call it, waveform generators and stuff. And then I come in and just make sure it retains the same look as the original movie is.
What's the typical length of a process of doing that to a film?
I spent 2 8-hour days doing the final grade. I think the other guy spent 3 days leveling it out, as I call it. So it's about, let's say, a week.
Is it strange going back? I mean, presumably, as a cinematographer, you go from one set to the next. Once the job is done, it's done.
Yes.
Is it strange kind of revisiting
no, it doesn't. It's
the
not
work?
done. It lives on. It lives on in
For
everybody's
you, it's
memory.
done,
And it
yeah.
lives on in the archives. And it lives on. And this film, I mean, amazingly, I mean, I remember Time Out's review of it really put it down. And, yeah. And I think the last line of the review was something like, let down by the undistinguished cinematography or something like that.
Oh,
now, of course, I've never forgotten that, have I? And it compared it to Performance, which was a completely different film, and they weren't fond of it at all. And it's grown gradually, you know, it's grown into what it becomes today.
But then, have you watched it down the years, down the decades? Have you gone?
Yeah,
back
I mean, I get DVDs of it. You know, when it first got onto DVD, I watched it to see how it looked, and then there was another version of that. Then I had to do. I did a filmed interview for, I don't know which was the second or third DVD. I did filmed interviews with John McKenzie and Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren, all those people. We all did interviews separately, and they were put onto that DVD. And then it was remastered again. But this is the first time they've actually gone back to the original negative. And what is interesting is that I was able to make changes. Not changes, that's unfair to say. I was able to repair things that photographically had sort of faded a little bit. But also, when I shot the film, there were some things that didn't work out light-wise or weather-wise. And photographically, you're stuck with the negative, whatever happens. Particularly, if anyone knows the film, there's a speech that Bob gives on the back of a boat with Tower Bridge behind him. And when we were shooting that, I mean, it was in July, and it was England, so you know what the weather was like. And as we started off, it was all nice and sunny, and as it kept going, it just got darker and darker behind him. And the lamp I had on his face to lift his eyes up, of course, became more prominent. And the color of the lamp was different to the weather behind him. So his face got a little redder. Well, the image got a bluer, but his face didn't change. So it looked slightly unnatural, not much, but just slightly unnatural. And photographically, you can't do anything with that, really, once the film starts. And the director, in his wisdom, said, well, I don't want to do that again. I think we've got, you know, because it was a very long speech. And we learnt, I don't know, about 5 miles down the river with launch boats all around us and, you know, making sure that no one cut across and stuff. So we didn't want to do it for a second time. So what I was able to do is actually correct that face and that background throughout the entire shot. So no one would remember that. No one would remember the original version. They would, you know, hopefully look at the new version. And
what's the secret of its longevity, do you think? I mean, is it its prescience? Is it the way that it was made, I think, just after Thatcher had come to power, and it seemed to kind of
4 months after she became Prime Minister, yeah.
And it seemed to anticipate a lot of change in the air.
Yeah, it did, but I think that was more Barry Keefe, the writer. He lived in that part of the world, so he was aware of what was going on. He also knew the underworld a little bit, and he was told stories. I mean, the man that gets crucified in the film, literally on the floor, he heard that from a colleague of his, told him that that had actually taken place. So he incorporated that stuff in. I think, like all films, it's just incredibly entertaining, and I think it's held up by Bob's vitality, by his performance, that you can't stop watching it. And those wonderful lines that he has, which are mostly Barry Keefe's. I mean, I think Bob put in a few of his own, but.
In your early days, you were working with Alan Clark, and you did Play for the Days and things like that, and then you've gone on to work on Bond films. Most recently, you did Casino Royale.
Much later down the line, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the first interesting you mentioned Play for Today. The first Play for Today I did was with the director of The Long Good Friday,
right,
John Mackenzie, which was a play called Just Another Saturday, which won the Italia Prize for the best play of that year, 1973, I think it was.
And he did Spend.
And I did Spend, which also won the Italia Prize as well. Not for me, but for the film itself.
What's more rewarding for you as a cinematographer?
Say again, sorry.
What's more rewarding for you as a cinematographer, working on those kind of small, gritty British films or the big studio product?
They both have their good points and bad points. With things like, I mean, GoldenEye, there were like 5 units independently working. I had to oversee what they were doing. Panavision told me I held the world record for the most amount of equipment out of their office while we were shooting that movie, because we had 3 units on one day, and each of us had 7 cameras, separate cameras, all working away. So,
but then you become less a cinematographer and more a kind of general of an army, don't you?
It's part of, but it's also part of the job. You establish a look, you work with the director, you decide how you're going to cover the film, how you're going to make it look. And then I have to organize it with the other guys and get them all into the loop and say, look, and sometimes I give them stuff and say, look, you can do that as you want, as long as it has that sort of feel to it. But with the smaller films, I find that you get more into the performance and the characters. But it's the key person is the director. It doesn't matter what you're shooting. If the director is a filmmaker, and he works with you and collaborates with you, that's the most rewarding thing, I think. It doesn't matter if it's big or small.
Can I ask a question? I mean, where you stand on this? I don't know if it's a debate. It's sort of film versus digital, and is digital a great thing, or is it a little bit soulless? And you can immediately see that film is better. Film is a sort of richer, a more present medium than digital. Do you
well, I think you can. The trouble is, it's now. I was in a film called Side by Side, which was a documentary about digital.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and at the time, digital didn't equal film, but it's starting to get better, and we're getting a better handle on it. And what we've discovered is that we need to treat it like a new film stock.
Right.
Therefore, it has ways we should expose it. We're now going back to older lenses because they have a softer appeal with skin tones and all the rest of it. And I don't think digital can ever match film. But, would anybody in this audience really, if I put 2 pieces of film up with the same thing, one was on film, one was digital, would they really notice the difference? I don't know. I think those of us in the industry do know the difference.
You probably would.
But it's becoming an economical thing now. All the wet labs, as we call them in Britain, are closed except one, which is just round the corner here. That's the only one left. There's none in Italy, there's none in Spain. But there used to be a wet lab in every country, and now they've all disappeared. That's the economics of it.
Let's watch another clip from The Long Good Friday.
gonna love this here, pictures, my old son. You're gonna love this. You ain't gonna. You're a big fucking hero.
What a luck you are.
Right, shut up, all of you. For more than 10 years, there's been peace. Everyone to his own patch. We've all had it sweet. I've done every single one of you favours in the past. I've put money in all your pockets. I've treated you lot well, even when you was out of order, right? Well, now there's been an eruption. So it's fucking Belfast on a bad night. One of my closest friends, he's lying out there in the freezer. And believe me, all of you, nobody goes home until I find out who done it and why.
Harold, believe me, look, if I knew, I'd say. Look, the last thing I want's any trouble. Everything's going too well for us.
You lying bastard.
Am I? Look, things have never been so good between South London and the East End.
You bastard.
You lying bastard, of course he knows.
All right, Alan.
You lying bastard.
Get him out. Lying bastard. Oi! Jay, you behave yourself. Right, lads. It's your decision. Frostbite or verbals, one of the two, right?
That scene particularly is quite interesting because in all the other DVDs, it has a very greeny cast to it. So what I was able to do there was get more green out without affecting the facial tones. And I hope I haven't destroyed it. People loved it when it was green. I mean, I keep looking at it and thinking to myself, maybe I shouldn't have touched it, but because the green gave it another, a layer.
Phil Méheux, thanks so much for coming in and talking us through the magic of the restoration of the still magical Long Good Friday.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's it from us. We're off to brave the elements again. And all that remains is to thank our guests tonight, from Phil to Asif to James to Peter and to Catherine. And a special thanks to all of you who came and made this such a lovely, occasionally pleasantly ramshackle experience, although that's possibly my fault. Next week, we are back in the sterile loneliness of the Guardian Film Studio. Please be sure to drop in and say hello.